Luke chapter 7, I want to just exhort you with this scripture here. As many of you know, we're in transition from our old building to our new building. So excited. I've been out there all this past week. Yeah, it was good. God was good. And was out there 2 weeks ago, was out there this past week. I'm going to be out there this week. I was just there Friday. And we're sketching and mapping and moving, and we got walls and things we're building and expanding areas and putting 2 rooms, squashing them into one, making 20 rooms, breaking them down to 6, expanding halls, and expanding, so a lot of stuff is going on, and we're all in pencil stage now. And someone said, well, man, how are we going to pay for that? Glad you brought that up, my friend. Glad you brought that up. No, anyway, Luke chapter 7. I'll just share this with you here. These are powerful verses. Verse 1. Now when he had ended all his sayings in the audience of the people, he entered into Capernaum. And a certain centurion's servant, so there was this military leader, and the guy had an adjutant, a servant, a right-hand guy, a helper, who was dear unto the guy loved, the military guy loved this servant. The guy was sick, and he was ready to die. And when the centurion heard of Jesus, verse 3, he sent unto Jesus the elders of the Jews, so it's a Gentile military leader, and he sends the Jewish elders to it, the elders of the Jews, beseeching him that he would come and heal the servant. He says, he sent the Jewish guys down. He says, hey, there's a Gentile guy. He's got this employee who's really not doing well. Will you come heal him? Verse 4, and when the elders of the Jews came to Jesus, they besought him instantly or earnestly, and here's what they said. This Gentile, who we know you don't help Gentiles, Jesus, because we know your ministry is all about helping Jewish people only. That's what Jesus said in his earthly ministry. It was all about one group. He said, but this guy is worthy for whom you should do this, because that's not your run-of-the-mill Gentile. This is not your average Gentile. He says, you should do this. Why? For this guy loves our nation, and this guy has used his money, his influence, and his power to build us a synagogue, or to build us a place to go to church and worship. Then Jesus went with them. And when he was not yet far from the house, the centurion sent friends now out to Jesus and said, Lord, trouble not yourself, verse 6, for I am not worthy that you should come under my roof, right? Reigns world, we're not worthy, right? So he says, I'm not worthy that you should come under my roof. Wherefore neither thought I myself worthy to come out to you, but all I need you to do is say a word, and my servant shall be healed. You say something, and my servant is going to be healed. Now this is the part here. For I am a man under authority. He said, I got a boss. And I got soldiers under me. That's just like Jesus. The Father was over him, and every other devil, sickness, and disease was subject to him. Here we go. He said, now I got people under me. And I say to this guy, go. And guess what? He goes. And I say, verse 8, to another, come. And he comes. And I say to my servant, do this. And guess what? He does it. What's he saying? And I know if you say to this sickness, get out of here, it'll get out of here. Verse 9, when Jesus heard these things, he marveled at this centurion. He turned about and said to all the Jewish folks following him, he says, I say unto you, I have not found so great faith not in Israel. He said, this Gentile knows my authority more than y'all know my authority. And so he sent them back, and as they were sent, they returned to the house. What did they find? The servant whole that had been sick. In other words, Jesus said, yeah, and sickness and disease is under me. And I say, go, and it goes. And I say, get out of here, and it gets out of here. And I say, don't ever come back again, and never comes back again. And what did the man know? He said, you don't have to come and touch my servant. The power's not in the touch, the power's in the word, he said. Now, the reason I shared this, and there's a lot here, and we could talk on it for days, but I like this verse 5. He says, for he loves our nation, has built us a synagogue. And I was thinking this morning, when we give in church, a lot of times people try to make our giving seem unspiritual. That they say, well, you shouldn't, that's the problem with the church today. It's all about the money and the buildings, and it should be about people. And that sounds really enlightened, but it's really silly. Because things like buildings or material things are tools to reach people. Mm-hmm. When we bring our tithes and offerings into a local church, the Bible says in Malachi 3 that there may be meat in my house. What he's saying is in the local place where people meet, in the place where people gather, that there will be resources on hand. Mm-hmm. And we think the resources are just what you use for the people. In other words, well, Pastor, I'll bring a box of chicken down because I know that'll help people. But let me tell you, when you put it down, where will you put it? Well, I'm going to put it in your refrigerator. So the refrigerator is a tool. Nobody eats the refrigerator, but it's just something that is used as a pass-through to minister to people. But we try to de-spiritualize. Well, that's the problem. We've got all these big churches, and they got these light bills, and they got this, and we ought to be giving money to help people. But that's so cheap to say that. It's such a low blow to say that, because what do you think these lights are for? What do you think these chairs are for? These are just tools. And so this guy builds a place where believers, these Jewish believers, they had a community. Think of how cool this is that this guy, whatever, he had the ability to write a check or whatever. He said, I see these Jewish people. He said, they worship a God I don't worship. But I see they're really earnest and really good people. And he said, I can afford to do this. And so he built them a place. And they were so grateful. Oh, thank you for this building. Now, the building wasn't God and the building wasn't, worshipped. It was just a place where they could get together and connect as a community and worship the Lord. Yeah, well, that's the problem. We got all these big churches. The Bible says that the churches used to be in the house. It does. It does say that they would meet in the house. But then it says they outgrew houses and they went to schools and they went to synagogues. They said that they would go preach to the Jews in the morning and then the Jews would leave and the Gentiles would come and they'd preach in the synagogue. So they were using old Jewish gathering places to preach. And then it says they would preach in the square. So over a long enough timeline, I was thinking about it this morning with Brother Osteen there in Houston. Some of you may have heard him. A guy named Joel Osteen. He's got a small little outfit there. Emerging church he's got coming up and coming. I really see some big things for that guy. If he just stays faithful, I feel like God's really going to do something big in his life. One day maybe. But anyway, they got the Compaq Center. 99-year lease on the Compaq Center. Hundreds of millions of dollars to secure this thing, to renovate the thing, etc. And I was, man, it's about the church. But really, it's never been about the Compaq Center. They never made it about the Compaq Center. It's just when you got 30,000 people coming to church on Sunday, Carol's living room is not going to get it done. It's just not going to get it done. So we say, oh, that's the problem. They take up all this money and they're trying to build buildings and they should be helping people. And that's just something that sounds spiritual, but it's absolutely just silly. People say, well, I think we ought to give money to help people. I'll give money to feed people in another country, but I'm not going to give money, just for speakers and for, wood and for... Okay, so how will you get to said country? Well, we have to have plane tickets. Okay, are the people going to drink or eat the plane tickets? No. When you're there, how long will you be there? 3 weeks. And where will you stay? Well, we found a hotel that we can stay in just not too far from the village. Okay, and can the people eat the hotel? No, they can't really eat the hotel. And when you do this, what are you going to do? I'm going to dig some wells. Are you going to use a drill? Yeah, we've got a drill. Do people eat the drill? No. And then what do you do? Well, we got to build the well. It's got the thing in the pump. Do people eat the pump? No, they don't eat the pump. And when you got the water, well, what do you carry the water in? Well, we've got buckets. Do they eat the buckets? No. What? Everything is a tool by means of which you go minister to people. But you try to make the idea that I would say, oh, you guys want to go to Africa and feed some people? I'll buy 10 plane tickets. Do you realize that when I write a check to Delta for 10 plane tickets, I've done just as much gospel work as the person handing out the water? Why? Because without the tool to go, you can't go. Nobody gets water. So we kind of despiritualize chairs. We despiritualize cameras and lights and stuff. This microphone, I don't know what it costs, $300 or whatever this thing costs. It's a tool. Man, there you guys go. It's all about people. Hello? Can't anybody hear me? Without the microphone... When we first started the church, we didn't need a microphone. The church went from here to here, and everybody could hear me. There was no speakers, there was no microphone. But in iChurch, I think I just saw, I don't know if you saw this thing, Jason, did I see 1,900 from the iChurch report from the things? 19? Yeah, for last week, 19. So listen, you can yell as loud as you want. It's not making it to Bismarck. It's not making it to Detroit. It's not making it to South Africa. Why? That all these tools. So money came and bought this, wherever this wire goes to that, whichever goes to that, which goes to that, which goes to in the World Wide Web, goes to that. People say that's the problem. We're all about stuff now. We used to be about helping people. Silly, dumb, silly, dumb. All of these things. Hundreds of thousands of dollars in technology and everything else. And guess what? It's going to help people. Now, people say, well, I don't believe in giving to the building and all this other kind of stuff. I don't believe in that kind of stuff. I'll give to help people, but not to build buildings. Let me ask you, how many of you, and I know we have first-time visitors here, and I can't see iChurch, et cetera, all of you, but how many of you are here in this room, I can't see overflow, et cetera, would say you've come into this room and your life has been touched and changed inside this room? How many of you said, okay. So now look at this. We first started this church, it was literally in my living room. It outgrew my living room, and it was in a little building across the street about the size of this room. It's outgrown that now 5, 6, 7 times. This church has never been about a building, ever. It's just been about where can we gather. So we're getting this new building, it's where we're going to gather. And we're going to renovate. It's going to cost hundreds of thousands of bucks to renovate the children's and expand this and do that kind of stuff. There they go again, spending on bricks and mortar. I'm trying to help people. Every brick we put in place is going to be used to help people. So whether we're doing weekly stuff that you give every week, or whether we're saying, hey, we're going to be raising, and I don't even know what the number is. We've got the money to acquire the building, but now that we're going through and drawing out and everything, we're going to have to figure that out. But don't ever let the devil or his crowd tell you, you're not doing something spiritual. And what's so powerful to me is that I don't know how long ago this guy built this thing in verse 5, this synagogue, but what's powerful to me is that they never forgot it. That it was not lost, the record was not lost. You may forget the seed you've sown, heaven never forgets the seed you've sown. And this guy got to a tight place in his life, and who'd have thought that they would go to Jesus and say, you should help this guy because he did this nice thing for us. I'm not saying you build a synagogue and God will bless you, that's not my point. My point is that we may forget all the things we do along the way. God keeps track of all that stuff, and heaven's record records even something as unspiritual as building a building. There's a record of it. You and I are going to get to heaven, many of us. I just speak it by faith. All of us are going to get there. No, just declare. Everybody listen to me. We're all going to be there. And wouldn't it be cool when we meet a centurion and we say, are you the one? You're the one that built that synagogue? Man, whatever did it? I don't know what. I wasn't even thinking like that, man. I had an idea. I told my wife, maybe we should do this. She said, yeah, you can do it. So I did it. I never thought years later. And here we are, 2,000 years later, we're aware of this little tiny act that this guy did. And it seems so unspiritual. But I tell you what, to those Jews that met in that building every day, it wasn't unspiritual. They could come together to hear the law. They could come together to worship Yahweh. They could fellowship. They could talk about alms and works of righteousness, all that kind of stuff. The building was never the focus. It was always about what happened inside it. But even though the building is something we call carnal, apparently it was remembered 2,000 years later. We are aware this man did a simple act to build a synagogue in front of the God. So don't ever be afraid. Say, man, I give to this. Whether you're giving a little, a lot. You say, Pastor, I only give like $10 a week, whatever. Pastor, I gave to the building fund. I gave $100. It was as much as I could. I spread it out over 2 weeks. It doesn't matter. You may think it's not spiritual, but every tool used to change lives is something that heaven makes record of. And when it's given to the thing, it's not much. Maybe you say it's not much. Maybe you say, man, this is a ton. Whatever it is, when it's given with the heart to be a tool to be used by God and to change eternal destinies, it's a powerful thing. Powerful enough that Jesus was even made aware of this guy's little simple act of bricks and mortar. And if they didn't forget then, God's not going to forget the things that you and I are doing now.